Alright folks, so today we are going to do another tutorial to help you guys get your maps looking as nice as possible. Now in my last tutorial I just did a basic conversion tutorial to help you get a layout and make it playable for carx. For the sake of time I didn't go too much into detail on some of the more unique problems that might arise when you're doing your conversion, but today we are going to be looking at one of those problems, which will be UV mapping. So what exactly is UV mapping and when will you need it? So I'll go through a few examples of UV mapping in this tutorial and show you exactly how to do it and when to apply it, some things to watch out for. But let's first off start with what exactly is UV mapping. So UV mapping is a 3D modeling process of projecting a 2D image to a 3D model surface for texture mapping. So if you look at this picture right here, you'll see that you have your 3D model, and that's made up of polygons or shapes. In this picture it seems to be squares. If you were to take that object and its polygons, project it onto a flat surface, right, then you have your UV map. And what you could do, then you would take your texture, put it on that flat surface, and then you reshape it back to the shape of that 3D model, and now you have that texture UV mapped or sort of wrapped around your shapes. So we are going to start with what I think is probably going to be the most common use case for UV mapping, and that is when you replace a texture, say this blue texture you see here, which is making up the base terrain. When you replace that texture, you find that the new texture isn't scaled correctly or isn't rotated correctly, or just in general looks like complete ass. And so we are going to go ahead and go over that and how to fix that. But it's important to note before we start the differences between textures, materials, and how UV maps are applied to objects. So a texture and a material are two different things. Textures are applied to materials and materials are applied to objects. So say for instance, let's look at this road surface. You can see that these road surfaces all look the same, but they're all individual objects. And that is because if we go to our shading menu here, then we come down into the node editor here. This is your material, and up here is the actual texture applied to the base color for that material. And so what that means is, so let's see, this piece of road there has the same material, tarmac dark AC. If we come over here, click on that piece of road, it's also tarmac dark AC. If I click on this texture image and I change that texture to, let's go track main 5, you'll see that even though I only changed it on this one object or piece of road that's highlighted in yellow, it changed all the other objects that are also using that same material. So before you start replacing textures, it's important to know that multiple objects can have the same material. If you change the texture applied to that material, all the objects that use that material will now have the new texture, but they won't necessarily all have the same UV map. So if you look at these two pieces of road, these are the same material here, tarmac dark AC, but you can see that this looks a little bit different in the scaling. And that is because the UV map on this piece here, or this object here, is different than the UV map on this adjacent piece of road. Alright, so now that we have that out of the way, let's go ahead and start on the base terrain. So we have this base terrain, it's blue. We can go to the node editor and find what that's using. So up in the shading at the top, down at the bottom, the material is background, and the texture for that material is terrain base.png. Here, link to the base color of that material. We can see that here in our texture folder, terrain base. So I went ahead and added in a new texture that I want to use, which is going to be grass number 3. So we are on that material. We can go here in the node editor and let's look for grass 3. We can load that in and you'll see it looks like complete ass. It's scaled way too large. That would render like absolute hot dookie in the actual game, but let's go ahead and fix that. So go to your top menu in UV editing, click it, and it'll take you to a new window, and you'll see on the right side this is your materials view. We're in materials view here, but we're also in edit mode. So in edit mode you can now see all the polygons that make up the mesh for that material. I can hit tab with my cursor in the viewport and it goes back to object mode. Hit tab again. Now we're back in edit mode. You'll see on the left side it's brought up the image, that texture image that this object is using. If I zoom out, you'll see the original UV map here, which is all the polygons that make up that base terrain that's off in the corner. It's not actually on the image. You don't have to worry about that too much. We are going to reset this UV map and fix it. So for this example, since I want to replace or fix the UV map for this entire object, I don't want to just do a section. It's alright that I have all the polygons highlighted. If I wanted to just do a certain section, I would just highlight the specific polygons that I want to change the UV map on, and you'll see on this side only the polygons that I selected from the right side show up. But we want to change everything, so I can just put my cursor in the viewpoint, hit A, and now all the polygons have come up. To reset the UV map, you can hit the shortcut U, or you can right click. Shortcut you'll see is U. If you want to unwrap it, and so here are all the polygons, and we have a few other strips of grass somewhere in there linked on this object. On the left side, we want to hit A again to select all the polygons that we want to change the UV map on. And right now we are on the move tool, so I can move this around. You see on the right side it moves around. I can rotate it. But what we need to do here is scale it. So by scaling the polygons larger, it's giving us more definition for that texture. And so basically you just need to scale it large enough until you get it looking correct. So we're getting closer to the resolution that it should be. It also helps to kind of zoom in and take a closer look. So we're not quite there yet. Now you can also do it numerically here if you want to do it exact on your X and Y. So we can come up here and do 3.5, and that'll give us, Z doesn't really matter because this is a 2D plane, but that will keep our scaling proportional, but sometimes it's just quicker to do it by hand. So I think that looks alright. Yeah, so that looks okay. If you do it too much, it can get a little bit grainy. So it's really just going to be a matter of personal taste, what you think looks best. You might want to go back and forth between the games to see how it actually renders out, but that scale looks about correct to me. So it is important to note that if you're going to do your UV mapping and you're working with the scale and you're using these axes here, doing it by hand, you do want to get it relatively proportional if you aren't using the numerical editor here to make it perfectly proportional on your X and Y. As you'll see, if I do it only on the X axis here, it can kind of look stretched, and so now you'll see the texture is stretched in one direction. Now to fix that, you would just need to go on the other axes and pretty much square it up. Now if you go too far, then you'll see the tiling of that texture, because even though this texture is supposed to be a seamless texture, if you scale it so that the resolution is very high, you'll see that the texture starts to repeat very noticeably, and that's not what we want either. So we want to get it relatively proportional, but we don't want the resolution to be too small. So you kind of just gotta think of how it would look in real life and get it to look as such. So that's a little bit stretched. You can see that rock is stretched. So you can get it to look a little bit more correct. So now let's go ahead and look at another example of UV mapping, and in this example we're going to be doing a UV map on only specific parts of an object, so specific faces. So you'll see on the left side, this is the texture that this clip marker is using. Now when I imported this model into Blender, the UV map was correct, but let's for instance imagine that maybe this only showed weekend or only showed drift, or something was messed up here. So I hit tab in the viewport, and that brought me into edit mode. So now I can see all the individual polygons that make up this object. Right now all of them are selected. I can just select off in the distance, and that will deselect all the faces, but I want to adjust only this side right here. So you can see on this side it's made up of a triangle here, a triangle there, a triangle here, and a triangle here. So 4 triangles. I want to select all those 4 faces. If I come up in this right side window into the top left corner, you can see I can choose by vertex, I can choose by edge. This is your edge here, or I can choose by face. Depending on the object, you might need to switch between these options here, but for this example I want to select by face. So I'm going to select that face, hold shift, select all the faces I want. In the left side you'll see the faces that I've selected. Now I'm going to reset that UV map by hitting U. So now it's reset that UV map. Now it's not placed correctly, but what can we do to get that placed correctly? Well, you'll see on the left side that shape here kind of matches up to this shape here. You have a flat edge here, and then you have an angled edge here. So on the polygons that I've selected, here's our angled edge and here's our flat edge. So I'll hit A to select all of those, and then I can go ahead and rotate it to match, and you'll see it's not lined up correctly, but we're getting close. And now I need to scale it so that these polygons basically fit and line up with this texture, or this piece of the texture that I want it to match up with. So let's go ahead and get this sorted. So we'll move it over, down a bit. I need to change the scale here. There, and that's how you could fix a specific piece of a object that you want to change. So the last example I'm going to show you is going to be fitting a texture so that it matches the boundaries of a specific object. So in this example I have this piece of road here, and I don't want to use this texture. What I want to use is this custom road texture that I made, but it has road markings in the texture. So this texture is not going to be tileable, as in I can't have Blender just let this texture automatically repeat across that entire object, because I need these yellow boundaries to match up with the edges of the roads. So let's go ahead and take a look at what happens if I just replace the texture. So that was custom lineless road, or custom road damage, and you'll see if I let Blender just tile it, You can see it's not one, for one, it's not scaled correctly. Two, the image is repeating and it's not rotated. So I can see that yellow line repeated over and over. So let's go to our UV editor. I have in this example all the polygons selected. I'll go ahead and unwrap it, and then let's go ahead and scale it. And you can see the tiling coming back into play even if I rotate it. Still is not going to work correctly because this texture has curves to it. It's not perfectly straight piece of road, so I can't get this texture to just line up perfectly. So in this instance, what I would need to do is, instead of UV mapping it to the entire surface, I need to select certain sections of this object or certain sections of the mesh and then do it procedurally. So what I would do then, click elsewhere to deselect those polygons. I'll find a relatively straight bit of road here. We'll just do this section here. Now I can move that. And you get something like that. Basically, by using a combination of move, rotate, and the scale, I've been able to massage it into place, and so now the boundaries of that road match up with the boundaries of that object. And I would just keep going down, doing it step by step until it matches up. Now, in this specific example, I have some very hard curves, and so this straight edge is not really going to match up. It's not really the best way to do roads with line markings. It's better if your line markings are painted on or are a completely separate object that you can manipulate. But for specific use cases, this method of UV mapping it might work. Alright, so that is going to be it for this tutorial on UV mapping. I hope this has helped you get your maps to look a little bit better, a little bit more like how you envision them. If you have any questions, as usual, you can hit me up on Discord. I'll put my information below in the video description, or you can just hit up any of the guys in the carx mods or go to Discord server. I'll be doing a few more tutorials on other common issues that might arise, so subscribe and good luck.